Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by plagiarizing a line of inquiry from Edward Luttwak, some of whose work you may be familiar with. Luttwak asked, what can make a good road a bad road? And his answer was, only strategy can do that. Only in the worlds of strategy does a good road, a road that is wide and broad and good for your army to march along, become a bad road precisely because your opponent has anticipated your move and now lies in wait along your good road, turning it into a bad road. I want to encourage you to think about the set of rules that is possibly the most important set of rules that exists, and that is the set of rules encoded within your opponent's head. There is very, very little that we teach in this school that would not benefit from a better understanding of how the opponent thinks, how the enemy thinks, how the other peace negotiator thinks. And only with teaching students through games do we encourage them to bring that dimension into their thinking.
Recovering board game designer, and I do believe games can be persuasive, and that's among the reasons I design games. I design games that are historical simulations, or at least they try to be. I'm using game design myself to learn about places and past events that I'm interested in. I want to dig into the system and understand it better, and I do that through design and through playing games.
So what we're doing is we're leveraging what happens in Washington, D.C. What happens in Washington, D.C.? What happens in Washington, D.C. is you've got a whole slew of wonderfully talented people who know a great deal about how we can make our world a better place. And they can't translate it. All these folks who know what we need to be doing, but they don't know the mechanism for doing the translation. This is what persuasive play is all about. It's for taking a vision and reaching out to audiences that may not be susceptible to reading The New Republic, but want to play the next game, and changing the world.
What excites me about games is that they are this medium of expression, might I say especially computer games, a underdeveloped medium, right? Where we can represent aspects of the world we've never been able to represent before, right? So when we look at that class struggle board game over there, it's more than watching or reading a book. There's gameplay about class struggle. You experience, not in the same form we get when we read, experience what this game designer encoded in this rule system and designed it into an experience that is about me. Making games requires literally just being a split person, completely understanding the technical aspects of games, how to create systems of rules that players interact with, which update the state of the system, but then also being over on the side of the arts and humanities and designing a system that people can find meaningful in their personal life.
These higher level issues that we've been hearing about, systems and strategy. Well, how do we learn that? How do we explore that? Sure, we can read it in a book, but a system that we're talking about here, I'm going to use a phrase I've come across, complex adaptive system, experts tell me. It's a concept in which what's explaining outcomes in something like fighting global disease, if you will, is the interaction of many, many interests and incentives and capabilities. And little changes in how those players interact produce different outcomes. Now imagine you're an analyst or a businessman or a diplomat or something, and you're trying to understand that complex system. We call it complex adaptive system because it really is complex. And you're on the outside and you're trying to understand that. It's tremendously difficult. I mean, the odds are really against us understanding all of those different interactions. To have a chance at that, we want to climb inside it. Now, if you actually are a diplomat and you've been practicing for a while, you can climb inside it as part of your work. But what if you're a student preparing to be? How do you climb inside? So we build models.
I want to briefly tell you about a game that we have integrated and just how much benefit we've received from such a simple game. Some of you may know The Prisoner's Dilemma. Now, you know The Prisoner's Dilemma, perhaps as many students do, as something that is taught to you. But let me encourage you to think about The Prisoner's Dilemma when you allow students to play The Prisoner's Dilemma. And when, in between successive rounds, you adjust the rules, you adjust the benefits and penalties for betrayal, such that you mirror the major theories of political science and international relations, realism, liberalism, constructivism. And I ask you to imagine the look on students' faces when you make them realize that their responses to the new environment, as it has been portrayed for them by these rule changes, exactly mirrors the predictions of realism, the predictions of liberalism, the predictions of constructivism. I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that that is an engaged student. That is a student who has had a learning epiphany which transcends something that is taught to them and becomes something in which they have a stake, in which they have personal investment.
Now a board game, to really play a board game, ultimately you've got to know the rules. It's all there for you, it's sort of laid out. And that means not only can you climb inside and understand it, but, and this is critical, you can challenge it. And that's when it becomes persuasive. Because I'm not just going to take, if I'm a smart student, I'm just going to take Volko's model of the war in Afghanistan and put it in my pocket and say, okay, now I'm smart. No, I'm going to say, well, how come we did it that way? I don't think that's right. And as soon as you get your students doing that, critiquing the model, they're now discussing what? They're discussing the real world.